Welcome back. It's great to have you along. If you've been here since the early morning hours, delighted that you've stuck around and are a part of what we hope will be a very informative day. America's Feature Series, and we are in the Murray Media World Studios here in Dallas, Texas. This is our National Security Dual-Use Technology Summit, and you're a part of it, and we're delighted to have you on board. My name is Scott Murray, and alongside is David Hamilton. He is the founder of the America's Feature Series, and of course, presently ranks as the CEO and has some information you'd like to share with our audience.
Well, yeah, I want to do two things, but two really blatant commercials. One for Murray Media. If you need someone to do an event like this or a live event, etc., Murray Media, that's the people you need to call.
Video or AV.
Everything. If you need a documentary made, they've made 2 Emmy-winning documentaries. All right, so these are the guys to call. Secondly, a little commercial. I want to know, a lot of folks have decided, I'm sure, went and had a little bite to eat, bio break, and all that kind of good stuff, but please come back. We've got great stuff coming up. We've got Heather Richman, we've got Dr. Will Roper, we have Major General Cameron Holt, all talking about innovation, acquisitions, the how-to, what we need to do to ensure that America remains at the leading edge of advanced technologies, et cetera. So please let your friends know about this. And for those of you who've signed up and are registered, please feel free to give a code, AFS 100, capital letter AFS 100, that provides free admission, free registration, complimentary attendance to this event, as well as the other 2 events. And we've got a couple of other really big ones coming up. We have our Space Innovation Summit on October 28th. And that is going to have a number of luminaries in the space world, in particular Space Force and other senior leaders there. On November 10th, we have General Petraeus, we have Admiral Mullen, we have Secretary Bob Gates, Lieutenant General Armano with Space Force. So there's a really outstanding group of people coming up. We're going to have General Raymond of Space Force. So please look at the website, invite your friends today. And if you wouldn't mind, post something about this, good, bad, or indifferent. Let your friends know that this is happening. And we'd really love to finish strong and have as many people attending as we can for the rest of the afternoon.
Absolutely. And it's, the thing that really excites me most is people that I know that watch these things and have done so over the years. They say, I had no idea it was going to be like that. I didn't know what to expect. It was really great. I had no idea this happens and they plan. So it's a real educational experience. So that's why I remain on board, because it's amazing how many people say, boy, I had no idea. So the wow factor is right there. Yeah. So, and certainly you just mentioned some of the people that are going to be involved. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So absolutely. We're delighted to have you here.
Appreciate you saying that. And Heather Richman, for example, part of the wow factor and the content, because the content matters. So I'd like to welcome Heather Richman back to us. I'm going to give you guys a little background on her, and she'll talk to you about her team, this panel. But Heather Richman, as the entrepreneur in residence at BMNT, Heather works alongside the U.S. Department of Defense and intelligence community to create ecosystems of innovators and investors to engage in national security-focused problem solving on all levels. Based in Palo Alto, California, she is the founder of the Defense Investor Network, which fuses the private capital investment ecosystem and the national security enterprise to promote agile innovation and transition while reducing the threat of foreign direct investment. We have to work on trusted capital. Anyway, previously Heather spent time on Capitol Hill, where she led appropriations, budget, and tax for U.S. Senate Majority Chuck Schumer, handled government relations for Stanford University, and was part of the founding team of Elementor Accelerator, the $36 million Navy initiative that has leveraged $2 billion in private capital and paved the way for energy innovation in the military. BMT provides a platform where innovators can work together at the intersection of business, government, academia, and society. Their platform brings to bear deep, mutually supporting networks of innovators, researchers, defense and national security officials to identify and solve complex problems for military intelligence community and defense innovation-based clients. So she's a complete slacker, does nothing. Her organization does absolutely nothing. There's no value at all. I'm not sure why we have her here. No, she is absolutely brilliant, knows everyone, and has been a staunch supporter, and we cannot say enough nice things about Heather Richman. Welcome, Heather.
Wow. David, Scott, thank you so much. I mean, in the same sentence as Dr. Roper and General Holt, you could have stopped there. Like I pretty much took it. I really appreciate your time. I love being part of AFS so much. I really appreciate the work that you guys do, perpetuating, communicating, a lot of the same things that we're working towards over here in the private sector. So I am out here from Palo Alto, California. Should I go ahead and jump in? Should I start introducing?
You're in charge, large and in charge.
We have a great panel today. Thanks again for having me. I've got Lieutenant Colonel Alex Goldberg, who's the Joint Technology Acquisition Officer at DIU. Alex, you're going to turn your camera on. I'm Nick Miller from the U.S. Federal Team Lead at Amazon Web. Steve Taub is a partner at InQtel. And we've got Jim Rabuck, the Southwest Regional Director for INSA. Now, I blew through those very quickly. I actually prefer you guys to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your background. Kind of people always ask me, how do you kind of get into investing and how did you, I kind of fell into it. I think most of us end up doing that. But we'd love to kind of hear a little bit about your pathway, what you've done before then, and a little about your work now, and then we'll get into your organization. So Alex, I'm going to go ahead and start with you.
Heather, appreciate it. Pleasure to be with you guys. AllStar Panel. Jim, how's it going? Big picture, my background, joined the military September 20th, 2001. So I just celebrated my 20th year in the military, was prior enlisted, then became a pilot, flew F-16s and MQ-9s and a bunch of different aircraft. I've been in the innovation space for quite some time, working up at Headquarters Air Force, Disruptive Innovations on the Intel side, recently as a DARPA fellow, was the founder of the Texas National Guard's Joint Innovation Unit, TMDX, and now I'm fortunate to be the Southwest Regional Engagement Lead for DIU. And if you don't know what DIU is was started about 5 years ago with this concept of why all of these innovation units existed, that at the end of the day, we need to be able to move faster, right? It's the precipice of right, the premise of this whole dual use technology. There's a reason why we care about dual use technology. It's always been a good idea to be faster and cheaper and better. We've never had to be, not until recently. Right back in the 50s, for every $1 in research and development, industry maybe had 50 cents. But now, right, instead of our research labs like DARPA that have created the internet, have created stealth, have created right everything in your phone from microelectronics to LCD screens, all developed really from the government. Now, a lot of these game-changing technologies, specifically around certain domains like artificial intelligence and autonomy and space and cyber, human systems, these things are really coming from the private sector, and they're not necessarily coming from our defense primes. And so how do we inspire them? How do we engage them? How do we support them? It's a passion of mine. I know what it's like to be an airman on the flight line who understands the problems, but understands, the unique opportunities to improve and get better. And, my passion was to, just like everybody who serves, you want to have an impact. And in this particular role, it enables us to empower airmen and soldiers who have great ideas and help them bring them to fruition, or companies that want to serve alongside us, right? Who want to help us out, who want to help us solve some of these really big national security challenges. But the bureaucracy, the idea has been really tough. So happy to talk about how we're lowering the barriers to entry, how we're making it easier, why this is important, and certain the focus areas where we sit in, we fall under the Office of Secretary of Defense, specifically under research and engineering. And so happy to talk about the SecDef's priorities, the research and engineering priorities, what DIU is going about to make it easier to work with, commercial technology, working with the government. So happy to take the conversation anywhere you guys want, but super fortunate to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm taking notes. We're going to hit a bunch of those. Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Nick.
Yeah, first, thanks, Heather, and thanks to American Future Series for having me. So Nick Miller, I lead the AWS Marketplace business across our federal segment for Amazon Web Services. For those not familiar with AWS Marketplace, we're a third-party service that makes it easy for buyers to find, buy, and deploy third-party software through AWS Marketplace. And so that's a really interesting concept that we're bringing to the defense and the national security community. My background prior to joining AWS about 2 years ago, I spent 6 years at InQtel. So it's good to see Steve on the panel as well. And before that, I spent 10 years as a practitioner in the military, deploying to Afghanistan and Iraq, and really largely was responsible for helping bring in commercial technologies that needed at the time of need, but necessarily hadn't been produced by the acquisition system. And so as an IT operator downrange supporting the 101st in the US Army, and then continuing that commercialization and commercial tech transition throughout my roughly 20-year career. My last role in the Army, I was the Chief Information Officer at Arlington Cemetery in 2010. And they had a huge modernization issue as well. And so I helped lead the cemetery through kind of their digital modernization and their digital procurement as they were facing congressional oversight and Hill oversight around some of their modernization challenges. So kind of got to exercise the levers of the procurement system and the technology ecosystem to drive true change and launch really one of the department's first mobile applications in the iOS store to help families and veterans visit the cemetery. So real honor to be here. Love the mission of supporting soldiers. What we do is real. Given my background, I know that really well. And I think it's time to really help lean into this modernization effort, and glad to play a part.
Awesome, Nick. Thank you for being here. Jim.
All right, thanks for having me. So a little bit about my background. So former Army officer with an interesting idea to leave active duty. So I was active duty for about 6 years. I was an infantry officer and had an idea for a company back in 2016 and ended up leaving the military and having a little bit of luck in understanding what it looks like to build a company and what it looks like to find investors and find people who want to work with your idea. Then I had the opportunity to go to Stanford Business School, and that's where I linked up with Alex Goldberg and setting the drumbeat for the Texas Military Department. He convinced me once again to say, all right, I'll go be active duty for a little while. So I joined the Texas Military Department again to really be his deputy at the Texas Military Department, focused on innovation for the National Guard in Texas. And then shortly after that, I raised up the hand to go work with Ensign. And now really I've worked at Ensign now for about a year here in the Southwest. Couple of the priorities that we have is really, it comes down to, and this is one of the priorities that the Deputy Secretary of Defense has, is it really lines up with how do we bridge that civilian military gap? What does it look like to bring culture change to the DoD so that when we're looking at what are the big changes, what are those big initiatives, how do we tackle those in a way that is quick, agile, and we can really move at a pace that our enemies are moving at? About Ensign as an organization, we fall under the organizational structure for DIU. We are part of the DIU NSIC Ensign structure. So that's OSD R&E. I personally am part of the part of the organization that reaches out to our DoD partners, startups, and academia. So largely happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion today.
Awesome, Jim. Thank you. And you said luck on your company. I'm sure there's a lot of hard work in there though too. Not just luck. Steve, last but not least.
Great. Thanks, Heather, and thanks for having me on this great event. So start off a little bit about me. I started out as an engineer, wanted to build airplanes. My timing was terrible because the Berlin Wall came down when I was a junior in engineering school. So that kind of upended my plans. But I had grown up around one of the big defense contractors where Dad was an engineer for 33 years. So I always had that interest in sort of defense and government, growing up. So I actually, my first job out of college was at the Department of Energy, where I was a Fed there for about 4.5 years. And after that, spent 22 years in the private sector, first as a consultant in the energy industry, and then moved over to GE Capital, where I actually initially was doing energy project finance deals. But that got me the opportunity to start making venture capital investments in energy technology companies. And from there, really became one of the founding employees of GE's corporate venture group and diversified quite a bit to focus on everything from advanced manufacturing and materials to autonomous systems and aerospace. And then joined In-Q-Tel about 2.5 years ago. So it's been a really interesting journey. And now I'm basically doing the substance of what I was doing in the private sector in corporate venture, but in the context of where I started my career back with aerospace and defense and government. In terms of In-Q-Tel itself, we are, the shorthand on In-Q-Tel is that we're the CIA's venture capital firm. It's not entirely accurate. We're not really a venture capital firm, and it's a lot broader than CIA, but it's a good shorthand, I think. Fundamentally, we're an independent nonprofit that supports a number of government partners to help them find and access technology from the startup community. And, as Alex, you gave a great version of a speech I often give about how, innovation financing has really shifted from government in the 50s and 60s and 70s to the private sector. And really, I think what led to the foundation of In-Q-Tel, and is still true today, is that a lot of the most impactful research and development and innovation is being funded by venture capitalists and done by startups. And so In-Q-Tel basically exists to help our government partners get access to that community. And I'm happy to tell you more about that.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We're gonna jump right in. Alex, you kind of outline a few things, talking about SecDef's priorities, talking about how you guys are lowering barrier to entry. I know that I'm assuming a lot of the folks in our audience here are folks that want to engage. And so I was part of the 5.5 years ago at this point, when DIU-X first came to Silicon Valley, and the excitement, frankly, around that. And I think there's been a lot of talk about how venture capitalists don't want their startups, working with federal government. So I think that time has passed. But I would love to hear kind of, what DIU is doing along those lines.
Yeah, I miss the X. I like to say that it's still there. It's just hidden and silent. Yeah. When Ash Carter first created it, it was because of this desire to move faster, right? And let me just provide a little bit more context before I get into the SecDef priorities, and you'll understand a little bit more of why that is the case. About 10 years ago, China really started to accelerate their defense budget. They've increased their defense budget by 10x over these last 10 years. By 2030, the thing that is getting all the Secretary of Defenses and the President, everybody focused in this particular area, and why all of these innovation units are popping up. What is Army Futures Command and Naval X and AFWorks and DIU to begin with, was that bottom line, we need to move faster. By 2030, the GDP of China will be larger than the United States. Their military budget will be larger. Their research and engineering budget will be larger. 40% of all STEM graduates, 40%, will come from China, 3.6 from the United States. So there is this notion here that in every simulation, in every Monte Carlo that we come up with from a national security perspective, to ensure that we are ready to answer the challenge, whatever may face in the future, we are not ready. And in order to be successful out in the future, all of our wargaming is such that the technologies that we win with have not yet been invented. And so there is this notion of how do we move faster? And there's a cultural piece that Jim will talk to. How do we get out of this, compliance-driven no because mindset? And how do we get into this never rest on our laurels, problem solving? How do we get to yes? But this is all about moving faster. And when it comes down to technology, where DIU fits in, as Jim talked about, there are 3 organizations that make up DIU. NSIN, the National Security Innovation Network, that is really trying to help companies that are from bar napkin to a technology readiness level of maybe a 5, right? They've proven out the basic fundamental applied research of their thing. And really to empower airmen, soldiers, right, across the DoD. Then we have NSIC, the National Security Innovation Capital. This is funding strictly for hardware that's at a TR level 5 that we're trying to get to a 7. Venture capital obviously does not like to spend money on hardware companies, right? The margins aren't as high, but we want to invest in certain key areas that we really care about. And then we have DIU, which is kind of the venture capital arm at the OSD joint level. And we have an organization focused in DIU on defense engagement. So we know where the problems and the money are. On the other hand, we have a commercial engagement team that have relationships with the Andreessen Horowitz and the Sequoias and the Y Combinators and all the big VCs around. And we understand where the stealth technologies, we understand where the cutting edge is. And our goal is to make it easier for them to participate. Example, we have a contracting authority called OTA, Other Transaction Authority. And we're different than any other OTA, which is a consortium. Only a certain amount of companies can actually participate. And it is an open, right, consortium. So we have the ability to let anybody participate. And all they require, instead of a traditional, you go to sam.gov, normal traditional defense website, the same 5 defense primes, it takes 20 to 50 page proposal, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then you get a hey, no thank you. For us, it's a 15-page slide deck. That's it. Send us your pitch deck. We normally get about 100 to 150 responses, and then we get the top 10 or 12. We have a shark-like pitch, and then we'll select 1 to 3, even up to 5 to down select and do a prototype. And then at the completion of the prototype, we're able to sole source and off to the races we go. But there's many challenges around cybersecurity, around transition, right? Right, from a DIU perspective, we're always continually thinking, as certain services have points on the board and really impactful technologies, how do we then scale that across the other services, our joint coalition and international partners? How do we make it easier for many of these companies to go in there and also tell the story that is that civil military fusion that I just talked about with China? They're taking it at a whole nother level. We're at universities around the country. And, even just a couple of weeks ago, I had to have a conversation with a couple companies. One was hiring a university professor from here in Texas that was on the payroll for the Chinese Ministry of Defense. Another company was willing to, was about to take, tens of millions of dollars from a venture capital, but the fund that was raised for that actually also came from the Chinese Ministry of Defense. These are things that, CFTS, we have these organizations, but we have a very robust counterintelligence, and to work with the venture capital to understand some of the tactics and the methodology that is going on so we can make sure that we keep our technology and help our country move faster.
You just outlined content for like 3 more panels. So we're going to have to, I think we're going to have to reconvene at some point, because trusted capital and that investor vetting stuff, you're right on. And like
Heather, I was gonna riff off of what Alex was saying. That's okay. Yeah. So where Alex is talking about, they have these solicitations that come out, and you're looking at 1 to 5 companies, and they're making these large bets and saying, hey, if we're going to make an impact, we're going to make it now. And they're connected with those big VC firms, and obviously like the InQtels, the Amazons of the world, to say, hey, we're going to do this now. Let's make this impact, and let's make this friction-packed process simplified, until the point that it becomes a program, right? Like eventually somebody's going to have to own it. I think one of the pieces where Alex really talked about is that 40% to 3% gap, right? What does it look like to say, how do we get the people who are the talented individuals in those STEM career fields to say, hey, I want to hold up my hand and go work at InQtel. I want to go work on these really cool projects. How do we go attract that community? How do we attract that talent so that eventually that gap is not 40% or 40 and 3, but instead, split the difference, or even imagine a world where a country that has 300 million people has more people in STEM fields than a country the size of China. A couple of things I wanted to highlight there to show some of the disparities. So I know we have AWS and InQtel here, right? So AWS is working with a ton of startups. InQtel is working with a ton of startups. The way that we think about this is you have this major funnel, right? So, and Alex, how many bets are you guys taking a year? Like 30, 40, 50?
Yeah, I mean, 50 or less, typically, starting with a problem and getting out there. But, obviously you guys work a lot more with a lot of these more seedling type companies to help mature them.
And so where I want to go with that is, it's exactly right. Like a way to think about how this group dynamic of everybody here, of how this begins feeding, is you have this incredible tech coming out of places like InQtel and Amazon. And where Ensign really fits in, I think for a lot of the groups here for dual use venture, is we start looking at, I have a chance to go meet with the directors at AAL and AFWorks, and I start looking at what are the investments that they're taking, and where can we de-risk some of those investments. And here's an example of how Ensign fits in this for probably a lot of the companies that are out there. So what we can do is we can help companies go develop early stage prototypes on behalf of the DoD, so that when you're getting ready to get into a SBIR contract, right? A lot of the companies here are looking for a SBIR phase 2 contract. What if you've already had money invested in you prior to even winning a phase 1 contract? And what if that contract is through Ensign and designed to build a prototype model with a stakeholder, so that when a phase 2 SBIR comes up, and Alex and I have gone through this a number of times, where we're looking for who's your MOU sponsor, who's gonna be that Sherpa for your product. What if you have that before you ever enter the pipeline with AFWorks and AAL on the front end? And that's something that Ensign, every single company out there should be saying, let me go identify that sponsor. Let's go build a prototype. And then you can enter into that. Will this fit a phase 1 SBIR? And then ultimately, let's say that you get to a company that produces right now and meets what the DoD needs. Well, all of a sudden you have a CSO through DIU where they can write a check for you in like 90 days, 60 days, maybe 30 days. So as those companies that are out there today that are listening in, if you have an idea and a sponsor, you go build a prototype, and then you can build that demand and show that demand before you ever even enter the funnel with an AFWERX or AAL. So anyways, I'll leave it there, but that's a pretty powerful opportunity for the companies that are out there.
And just tactically speaking, I mean, if either of you, how best do they get in touch with you? How best do they start this process?
Yeah, from my perspective, www.diu.mil. We put our solicitation. So we start with a government customer and who has a problem, and then we open it up. And typically you'll see right now we have a solicitation on the website. Typically these things are anywhere from a sentence to a couple paragraphs long in normal English speak without any acronyms. Right now we're looking at a hybrid space architecture that could integrate a number of disparate systems in more of an open architecture. Think of more joint all domain command and control. How do we connect all of our disparate space systems together and have this hybrid architecture, both from the space and ground? But that is an opportunity right now. And you can easily throw in your 15-page slide deck. Jim?
So a couple things. So the way that Ensign is structured is we have regional directors like myself all across the US. Two things that you need to do. First, go to the website. It's ensign.us. We're actually switching domains to ensign.mil very soon. That's nsin.mil. What you should do is go identify who the regional director is for that region and reach out. And then the next thing that you need to do is we cannot start on anything with the company unless we have a DoD sponsor that says, we want to work on this. So the other part that these companies really need to do is if they have a concept, they need to go investigate what unit cares about that and see if you guys can have a conversation, or at least talk with an Ensign rep that can say, here's who you might want to go talk with and begin investigating that. Because ultimately what it all starts with is a DoD sponsor saying, we have a challenge with this, but sometimes we don't know what we don't know, or most of the time we don't. So.
Terrific. That's extremely helpful. A couple of things going on in the chat, and actually a question. Somebody said part of the problem is very few developers at our top schools or companies know who In-Q-Tel, DIU is, or are biased against work with national security. Many of today's schools have faculty that are agnostic to defense. Kind of, Jim, with your role, I know that you touch universities quite a bit. Are you finding this? I mean, what can we do to help alleviate that?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. That's really Ensign's mission is how do we get those people who are incredibly talented to see the military beyond, bullets and bombs. I think if you look at DoD infrastructure and bases, San Antonio, I don't know what percentage of citizens in San Antonio are tied to that base, but it's a lot. And it's probably more than 15%. So you have a city of almost 2 million people that almost entirely thrives off of the military population. I think the other things is we start looking at what Steve brought up around energy resilience. What does it look like for the next energy producing technology that can be driven through the DoD, and you can work on that. We have HR systems, we have medical systems. You have this massive plethora of things that you can do within the DoD that aren't tied directly to fighting. However, if people are passionate about national security, those are also things that we need to focus on. So really, the way that Ensign does that objectively is we have two portfolios. We have the National Service Portfolio, where we provide paid internships over a summer. In addition to, we have year-long fellowships where they'll go attached to DoD labs, headquarters elements, where they'll get to work with Army Research Lab, or they'll go work with Air Force Research Lab or DARPA and say, here, what are some compelling reasons to bring them in? And specifically, even here in Texas, we have 5 TNSF fellows starting this year as PhD candidates. We're going to support headquarters elements to help bridge that gap. And then we use them as really, they become ambassadors for what the DoD really is. And it's really, we're not much different from the citizen that didn't put up their hand. It's really just an opportunity to bridge that gap.
Got it. And Steve and Nick, we're going to get to you, I promise. But quickly before we move it, so just on the university side, and Ensign has partnered actually with BM&T around hacking for defense. And we've actually worked on something called Hacking for Allies, which is actually getting international companies to come and work with our Department of Defense. Can you just spend a minute or two talking about that?
And BMNT has been an incredible partner on that. Pretty much the backbone of how that works is Max and the BMNT program. So you have this program with undergrads who have probably never interacted with the DoD. And then all of a sudden they say, we want to work on a problem set where we can tow a helicopter around without an engine, or we want to go work on something where we want to help drones communicate faster between. They had this concept for racing drones. Really, what it comes down to is you have thousands of students all across the country who are working directly with a military member to solve an issue or solve a problem. And at the very beginning, you can see how they start off. They're kind of uncertain. They're like, who's this person wearing a uniform on the other side? And then at the end of it, you see these relationships build where they, at the end of the day, like many times, probably 20 or 30 students have come to me and say, hey, I would like to potentially serve. How do I do that? Like what I've been so compelled by what we did. I want to hold up my hand. I want to go serve. And I say, hey, here's an opportunity. The Texas National Guard would hire you. So that's usually my stick. But anyways, yeah, Hacking for Defense has been a fantastic program.
And I think even just the idea that kind of training the next generation of national security entrepreneurs, right? So when people start their companies, start their startups, they might be thinking in a dual-use way more so than before. So I don't want to neglect our other two panelists. I want to think about, as you guys are talking about problems and CSOs, and I kind of think about it as rifle shooting. How do we identify and target those really world-class teams, whether they're students or later stage companies? Kind of this identification and prioritization of problems, but then also those that can provide solutions. And so I know Steve and Nick and all of you meet a lot of companies. How do you pick through? Like, how do you kind of target those that are really going to change the game? Steve?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting approach. So, Alex and Jim talked about DIU's approach for finding innovations. We kind of go about it in the opposite direction. So, In-Q-Tel has a team of about 20 people on the investment team who, we collectively talk to several thousand startups a year. And we're kind of mapping that against, the problem sets that we get from our 8 different U.S. government partners who have a really wide range of missions, I should say, intelligence collection, analysis, defense, law enforcement, public safety. And we're working top to bottom within these organizations too. So as much as everybody gets excited about the sort of, James Bond stuff that, Q might have provided, that's where the Q in In-Q-Tel comes from, actually. A lot of it is actually kind of prosaic. My favorite example of this being that a couple of years ago, In-Q-Tel did a deal to support the people who were in charge of the parking lots at Fort Meade, where the NSA is based. But really, what we're doing is, we're out talking to large numbers of companies every year and looking for where those might fit in to solve a government problem. Some of the companies we talk to, it's, they come to us, it's, they have an idea and maybe there's a fairly clear fit. A lot of the time, we reach out to companies who never even considered that there might be somebody in the government, in the IC, let's say, who is interested in what they're working on. So it's kind of a two-way street. We don't publish that list. We don't put out solicitations that say, hey, we're looking for X. We just talk to lots and lots of companies, and we find a lot of things that maybe you wouldn't find if you were on a more directed search.
And you mentioned you're not a traditional venture fund. Can you just spend a minute talking about kind of how you do invest?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we're a nonprofit, and our mission is to help the connect the national security and intelligence community agencies to the startup community. So we basically do 2 kinds of deals. What we're best known for and what we've been doing the longest is what we're actually doing is funding a company to do a development project to adapt its commercial product for a specific government customer. So, in that situation, we already know who the customer is. Sometimes we have to obscure that a little bit. We can't always tell the company who the customer is or what their use case is going to be, but we know who the customer is. We set up the program to basically to maximize the chance that if this is successful, that the customer is actually going to go and do business with this company once it's complete. And that's been a pretty successful model. So about 70% or 2/3 of our work program deals are completed successfully. Now, obviously, sometimes the technology doesn't work or the company gets acquired halfway through by somebody who doesn't want to continue the project or something like that. If that's not happening, we're not taking enough risk, I think. But of the ones that are successfully completed, again, about 2/3 of those lead to an adoption by the government. So, the success rate, if you will, is close to 50%. And as a reformed corporate VC, I can tell you that's extraordinarily high. Most corporate VCs would be very happy to get 20% adoption of their portfolio companies' technologies and products by their parent company. So what we do is we've actually put together a development project with deliverables and milestones. We pay for that in cash. And as part of that transaction, In-Q-Tel gets a small amount of equity in the company. We think of it in terms of equity coverage on the money we're spending. It's, typically 50 cents on the dollar. And these are anywhere from $500,000 to about $3 million projects. So, a $2 million project sort of looks like $1 million of equity and $1 million of NRE or revenue to the company, but it's kind of paid over time as they deliver on it. But at the same time, once we have a relationship like that, we always want to have a board observer, which gives us the relationship and the visibility and the situational awareness about what's going on in the company and in their industry. And we help these companies, with advice and introductions and connections, just in the same way that their venture capital investors do. So we do about 30 of those deals a year across a really wide range of technologies, from gene sequencing to quantum computing. The other 30 or so deals that we do every year are just pure equity investments in companies that we want to get closer to, keep an eye on, build a relationship with. Those tend to be smaller checks. A couple $100,000 is typical. And similarly, we almost always have a board observer with those companies as a way to build that relationship. So that's basically the model that we use.
And you guys have been around for about 20 years, is that right?
Yeah, I think it's 21 years now.
21. And how large is your portfolio, mostly?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but it's probably close to 600 companies that In-Q-Tel has worked with in that time frame. There's definitely some names that you would know. Maybe the best recent example is Palantir, which I think In-Q-Tel started working with about 10 years ago. Other names you might know would be like FireEye was one of our portfolio companies, or Keyhole, which became Google Earth, was one of our portfolio companies. There's about half of the companies that we invest in, we're able to acknowledge publicly.
Hey, Steve, can you talk about In-Q-Tel Emerge and how you're helping, entities like DARPA help transition their technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So Emerge is a new program that we've just launched in the last year, and as Alex says, it's with DARPA, and the idea, as Alex said, is to help DARPA performers commercialize their technology. So, I think it's figure out, first of all, is this something that's even suitable for commercialization? And if so, what's the best way to commercialize it? Should we license this? Should we sell this technology to somebody? And who might that be? Should we start a company to develop this and turn it into a business? So we've got now a staff of people who are working with different performers in different areas to go through those things, and I think it's off to a good start.
Hey, Steve, I had one other question for you too. Based off of that, when it comes down to the size of the companies that you're investing in, are you typically investing at seed, A, B, and what's kind of the standard investment that comes from In-Q-Tel?
Yeah, so I guess I'd say we're officially stage agnostic, but most of our investments are seed to Series B companies. We want them to be mature enough that there's going to be something that our government partners will actually be able to use within a year or so. So what we call ready soon technologies or products. On the later end, it's really more a question of what the companies are interested in doing. Sometimes we work with very late stage companies that have raised a ton of money who are looking for a way to build a federal business. Other times companies like that say, well, we can handle this ourselves, or, this is, just not an attractive deal for us. And in terms of the deal size, equity only investments are a couple $100,000 is typical. Work program investments anywhere from 500,000 to about 3 million, and there's often follow-ons. So we might do a second, third work program with the same company, so it can build from there.
Just from the investor standpoint, I do know that an In-Q-Tel investment, no matter how large or small, really signals government interest and intelligence community interest. So there's a lot of impact there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are. I should have mentioned this before. We're always co-investing alongside of institutional venture funds. We're not in a position to fully fund companies or do the same kind of company building and governance work that the venture capitalists do. We probably co-invested with almost every venture capitalist out there at this point. You just do the math, 500 companies, 500 plus companies. So we don't have particular favorites or partners or anything like that. But we have long-term relationships with all of the Silicon Valley firms, and it's not just even in the U.S. About 10% of our portfolio is outside the U.S.
And Nick, what's your process when you're investing in companies or
so we're not an investor. Marketplace is a third-party service that truly makes buying commercial software easy. And I think this goes to kind of maybe a pairing to what some of these R&D and innovative programs like DIU and InQtel look at is how do you transition and how do you streamline procurement and reduce the cost of sales? What we see commercially is prominent CEOs like the CrowdStrike CEOs have said their transactions through Marketplace occur 50% faster. And so my charter is to think about how do you take that technology and then bring that to market in the government to scale technology. I think we'd all sit here and say, if we could shorten the software procurement cycle by 50% for innovative technologies, we do a lot better about bridging the valley of death and all of those challenges of getting dual use technology. So that's my team's charter. It's to do that across the federal government and across DoD and think about how to transform procurement. The government has a mandate to buy like commercial industry. We have 300,000 commercial customers buying this way. So I think it's a really important thing to recognize that, like, if you have that mandate, one way to live that mandate is to maybe think about how do you implement policies to adopt these services that are proving to scale technology across commercial industry, and I think could provide a service layer to scale technology across programs.
I agree. So a huge piece of that is obviously the cybersecurity aspect of that, which is non-trivial, especially, we're working on reforming policies like CMMC, which hasn't even been implemented yet is already giving everybody, heartburn and going, is it really accomplishing what the intent is, that was originally set out? And so finding ways, whether it be the cybersecurity transition, right, finding it faster, cheaper, easier ways for DoD customers to acquire this technology. Many of these great software companies, we're just not able to adopt because there's no certification to field. There's no authorization to operate on any of these. People don't understand FedRAMP certification process. This is foreign language to them. And cybersecurity and cyber hygiene wasn't at the very forefront when they were building their technology. And to duct tape or strap on cybersecurity, post development of software, non-trivial, if even possible. And many times it costs more than building the program just from scratch. So yeah, totally understand. And that would be a great initiative to try to lower that barrier as well.
Yeah, I think if you think about it, right, some of the key challenges for dual use is both just access. And so there's a number of great things that DIU and NISN and InQtel are doing to provide better access to the problems where their technology, but then it's procurement and then it's security. And I think folks have to recognize you can't actually get an ATO unless you've been bought and put into an environment, right? Unless you're going to a PATO for a multi-tenant cloud solution. If you're a customer hosted solution, that ATO depends on other things. And so somebody has to be that first person to buy the technology. And if you can streamline that procurement, I think you could see a lot of technologies getting that ATO more easily.
All right, we're getting all sorts of chats. Alex, thank you for your email. And Nick, so back to the, just identifying those that you're going to work with. How do you do that?
Look, we work backwards from customers, right? So all of AWS, we work backwards from what kind of capabilities do our customers need. As a third-party marketplace, I get access to both kind of what do the customers need, but also what am I seeing successful commercially, and how can we then help mate those commercially successful technologies with capability needs that the government has expressed to us. And so I have a team of what we call category managers, pretty broad team who's out looking at the market and making sure in the marketplace we have those best technologies. And so we see earlier and earlier in a startup company's journey, their board talking about what is their marketplace strategy? How are they going to go to market with the hyperscalers like AWS to accelerate their sales growth? And so I do think there's a really natural transition aspect that if we could provide a common service layer to both procurement and security, we could really help accelerate adoption across the programs.
No, I think it's a great model, and I think I'm not going to call you a prime, but you're kind of but getting that transition piece right there. I think that was the spirit in which primes originally were set up, and then we're seeing companies like yourselves, like AWS, jump in and provide this assistance, and it's really phenomenal what you guys have been able to do. Just quickly, I was want to, Alex, if you'd be willing to run through, and Jim, just kind of the DIU portfolios that exist, and really what sorts of things you guys are looking for.
Yeah, from a DIU perspective, we have artificial intelligence, autonomy, space, cyber, human systems, and now our newest portfolio, which is advanced energy and material. And so really big Secretary of Defense priorities is around China, COVID, climate, build back better. When we're talking about energy, we are really talking about contested logistics. This is a very big theme. We just saw the supply chain challenges that we just had through a worldwide pandemic. In the next challenge that we face, we will not be able to get a gallon of gasoline downrange. We will not have unfettered, clear communication. We will not be able to ship parts downrange. We're going to have to be able to do expeditionary part production at the edge compute, analysis right at the edge, looking at geothermal, small nuclear, right, electrification of the vehicles. It is around energy and water resiliency. We saw what happened in Texas with the winter apocalypse. Imagine if we're trying to do that island chain hopping, which, every single day, the drumbeat between China and Taiwan is growing. The ante of how many fighters and barricades are going around that particular region in the Southwest, the South China Sea, very clearly understanding that contested logistics is going to be a huge piece. And a lot of these disruptive technologies are around additive manufacturing, around energy, is not coming from our primes, right? They're coming from some of these small companies. And that's why it's hugely impactful in this particular era right now to be able to work with them. And Jim and I are super excited. So those are just some of the key areas that we're looking into that we need everyone's help on.
There's a quick question in the chat for you. Does DIU have something like an open topic, like Affleck's offers?
Yeah, the quick question is, I would love for us to be able to have an open topic. DIU X, right? DIU version 1.0, which we found really cool, shiny toy. And then we went to the DoD and across the services and said, hey, we found a tank or a airplane or a spaceship. Unfortunately, our funding that we get from Congress is specifically allocated to fund a particular thing, train, man, equip. And we have a lot of restrictions on how we do that. The SBIR funding, the reason why they could do an open topic is because they're not earmarked towards any particular thing. For us in DIU, we always now start with a defense customer who has a problem. And then we go find the latest and greatest technology to be able to adopt that. Obviously, it makes the transition all the way to a program of record much, much higher versus then just trying to, right in the DoD, push a football up a peanut butter covered mountain of bureaucracy. Which is really totally challenging. I would love to be able to do those open topics. I would also like to be able to figure out ways to close the gap between there's a successful thing, but our budget isn't able to buy anything for 3 years. We're working on the budget in 2023 now. And so how do we have a little bit of dry money, right? Dry powder to be able to help close that gap, to prepare a low rate production, to get it dialed in before we can actually get to a program of record. These are all the things that we would love to be able to do. I foresee an open topic, just not, probably in the next 12 months.
Okay, and the follow-up question, he says, what if they come to you with a customer?
Well, if they actually come to us with a customer, we are happy to talk with those customers. And where DIU comes in is we have our own contracting team. Everyone's a GS-15 full bird colonel. We have our own program managers across the joint services. We even have our own pots of money, which is research and development focused. We're also, right, we can help with policy. So all those times, if you happen to be working with a customer and they just going through their normal bureaucracy of their own contracting shop need a faster way, absolutely, please reach out to me. I definitely want to work with them. I work on that defense engagement so that they understand that they can use DIU as a tool in their tool bag to be able to move faster.
I have a feeling you're going to be hearing from Jared. He's the one who's been asking these questions. So,
hey, Jared, hit me up.
He said, awesome answer. Thank you. So thanks, Alex. And Steve, really quickly, you mentioned a couple of the different portfolios, but broadly, are you guys doing work in energy? You kind of an energy background.
Yeah, super broad. So we sort of divide the world into what we call field technology, enterprise technology, and cyber. And we're actually launching some new practice areas around biotech, for example, and maybe some others. So, I mean, we're definitely interested in energy. We have a lot of appetite among some of our customers for things like battery technology, for example, alternative energy sources, wireless power. We're interested in materials and manufacturing technologies. Some of the things that Alex was talking about, being able to build things in the field or build super high performance things that are difficult to make with conventional technologies. We are very interested in communications technology. That's a big focus for us. I mentioned autonomous systems, robots that fly in the air, swim in the sea, drive around on land, orbit the Earth. We've been a very big investor, for example, in the commercial space world for the last 5 years, probably. We've got, I don't know, 15 or so portfolio companies in commercial space, most of which we haven't publicly acknowledged. But definitely, if you're familiar with that segment, definitely names I mentioned biotech. We do a lot with things like databases, artificial intelligence applications, developer tools, cybersecurity, quantum computing. So, just given the range of missions and the range of needs within these very large organizations we work with, it's super broad. It's one of the reasons we don't publish our problem sets, is because they're so broad that it wouldn't really be that helpful for anybody.
Got it. Understood. We've literally got no more minutes left, but Alex, I just wanted to give you, I know that there were a couple questions on China. I know that that's a topic of concern for folks, and especially in the investment community. Any last words?
At the end of the day, this is a whole of community, a whole of state, a whole of nation approach. It's the non-traditional primes like Amazon. It is the whole entire DoDX community, to include the In-Q-Tels of the world, but it's our academia, it's our startups. I know it is not easy to work with the DoD. We're trying to make it easier. But at the end of the day, this is a whole of world approach. We need to all come together. It doesn't matter right, left, backgrounds, creed, religion. At the end of the day, we all need to come together to be able to move faster, and we need your help.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. Great conversation. Like I said, I hope we can all get back together again and tackle some of these other topics, but appreciate your time, guys. Thanks.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Outstanding. Heather, you're a rock star. That was just great. Unbelievable. And we can't thank you enough. When is it that you take over as the host of 60 Minutes now?
That starts in January.
In January, huh?
New year.
Oh, you're great. Well, thank you so much. That was just wonderful. Stay safe, stay strong. We appreciate it. Heather was just great, wasn't she? She really was.
And every one of those people has been a friend of the America's Future series, has participated. I think Steve with In-Q-Tel is sort of new to us. But they've all participated. They've invited others to participate. They've done outreach. They connect people. They're very civic-minded, servant leaders.
That was very obvious. Yeah. Just very down to earth and very civic-minded. Yes.
Yeah. And they have a mission. They all surround around a cause, which is like Alex's point at the end. This is a whole nation challenge, and that we have to work together beyond the traditional primes. And to know that people are dedicating their lives to this, so that this is their profession, and they're doing everything they can to facilitate discussion, collaboration, innovation, knocking down barriers. It's very heartwarming.
Yeah, it certainly is. For those of you that might just be joining, America's Future Series, National Security, Dual-Use Technology Summit. Delighted to have you on board. We've been here since about 8 o'clock this morning, Central Time, and we have a couple more hours yet to go. Still lots to come, and still lots of great information to share with you all. I'm Scott Murray. This is David Hamilton. He is the founder and CEO of the America's Future Series. What do we got coming up?
So we're going to, at the top of the hour, which is 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Eastern, we're going to bring Todd Fordsman on. But what I thought we might do, though, is give people another little 5-minute bio break.
Great.
Give people a chance to, stretch their legs, et cetera, answer email. I want to thank the people. I know this is a day-long event, and we have people coming and going. We can't really expect people to spend 8 hours a day during the middle of their day for their work day at this time, but be able to come in, come out, see these different things, et cetera. We're averaging 380, 500, something like that, people throughout the day.
Fantastic.
That's really great. And, I just appreciate the people, the stick-to-itiveness, the people that are staying with us, and stuff. But we understand you need a bio break, so we're going to let you take that.
This is it. Go for it. We'll see you at the top of the hour.